Hey there, today I'm going to be benchmarking the Intel Celeron G470 in 21 games, and I'm also going to be testing it for general multitasking and video editing, and I'm going to run a few synthetic benchmarks. The Intel Celeron G470 is the last single-core CPU ever produced by Intel, and it's also the fastest single-core CPU. It runs at 2 GHz without a turbo, and it has 1 core and 2 threads. I am pairing this 1-core 2-thread CPU with 24GB of DDR3 RAM at 1600 MHz. The game drive and the boot drive are both SSDs, and the graphics card is a NVIDIA GTX 980 Ti with the latest NVIDIA drivers. Yes, I know the graphics card and RAM is overkill, but I'm testing the CPU here, not the graphics card. The first game I'm testing is Apex Legends, and Apex Legends opened and gave me a black screen. I could see the MSI Afterburner overlay on the top left of the screen, and that's about it. The computer was extremely hard to navigate, it was almost entirely frozen, and the game just never got past that point. It was sitting there for over half an hour, and I gave up because I had other games to test. The next game I'm testing is BattleBit Remastered. I am playing at the Potato preset, and I am playing on the smaller 32 versus 32 map. And I'm actually happy the game ran, but that's about all that I can say. Well, actually, it didn't really run, it kind of walked. So, the average frame rate was 39, that's okay, but then the 1% lows are 0, meaning the game sat there frozen for over 1 second. That's not good, especially in a game like this, which requires you to be shooting and, well, paying attention and having faster reaction times. A second of the game sitting there frozen isn't very acceptable, but then again, most of the time it was not frozen, but it's still not great. Is it playable? Sort of. I'll let you make that decision. The next game I'm testing is BeamNG Drive, and in BeamNG Drive, I am on the second easiest map to run. Instead of driving on the completely empty map of nothingness, I'm driving on the grid map that has a few little jumps and things like that on it. At least it's more than just absolutely nothing. Either way, in the grid map at the absolute lowest possible settings, the game is running at an average frame rate of 12 and it has a 1% low of 5. I actually got distracted and played the game for about 17 minutes, so is it playable? I guess to me, apparently, yes. Is it playable, really? To most? Absolutely not. It is... no. The 12 frames per second is... it's not good. And if you go over and spawn in any other cars, there's going to be a lot more lag than just 12. You might be getting 6 frames per second pretty quickly if you do that. The next game I tested out was BioShock Infinite, and the game completely reset for me for some reason. I don't know why, so I had to start all the way from the beginning again. Either way, BioShock Infinite was somewhat playable. It was getting 46 frames per second on average around the main map, or at least I think this is the main map. There's a lot more to the game from my understanding, but to me this is as far as I've ever gotten in the game. Around where this theme park is, it does get a little bit more laggy. You can get some more larger lag spikes and drop below 30 frames per second at times. The 1% lows are 10 frames per second, but overall, I would say this is quite playable. What do you think? The next game I tested is Naraka Bladepoint, or something. I don't know how it's pronounced. Either way, Naraka, whatever it is, Bladepoint did not run. Or not even walk. It kind of just sat. Basically, I pressed the play button and acted like it was opening the game. It got to where it says 24 entertainment. And that's about where it ends. It froze at the 24 entertainment for over 8 minutes and it just did absolutely nothing, so I gave up and moved on to the next game. I also tried Borderlands 3 and it didn't work at all. Well, it showed me the starting splash screen where it says Borderlands 3, and then it got to this black screen, and it just sat here. And sat here. And sat here. And, as well, proceeded to sit here, and sat here, and sit here, and sat here, and sat here, and sit here, and you get the point. The game froze. That's what I'm trying to say. It just never recovered, and it just stayed frozen, and I gave up and turned it off after about 15 minutes. It's rare when I test a game called Brawlhalla. It's a extremely easy game to run, it's 2D, and it has a 60 FPS cap. And it doesn't even have any graphical settings. It's either 1080p, 720p, only resolutions you can adjust. You cannot adjust the settings for, let's say, the textures or the shaders, nothing like that. Either way, the game is extremely easy to run regardless, and that shows because on this Intel Celeron thingamabobber we have today, we were getting 57 frames per second on average, and the 1% lows were 22. Often it was actually reaching the 60 FPS cap, which is pretty impressive. Here's a fun one. So CSGO 2, Counter-Strike 2, it doesn't boot or open on a 6-core AMD Phenom. Yes, a CPU with 6 cores cannot open CSGO 2, or Counter-Strike 2, whatever you want to call it. But this 1-core, 2-thread CPU has the right instructions, and it's actually able to open CSGO. What a weird world we live in. But that's about where that ends. It freezes and doesn't get past what you're looking at right now. It just gets to this point and gives up and just never gets past it. But hey, at least it opens. And I was able to open up a deathmatch run, and I was able to get to the point where I could either choose the left one or the right one on which team I want to be on, so I would say that's a win. So when Cyberpunk first came out, if I'm not mistaken, it didn't work on 2-core, 4-thread CPUs. Then later on, they reduced it to only not working on 2-core, 2-thread CPUs. So I had zero expectation this game would work. But look, it is working! We're playing Cyberpunk 2077 on a 1-core, 2-thread CPU. That is a first. I never thought I would say that. I recorded this video a long time ago, and I'm doing the voiceover over a week later, and I still can't believe that Cyberpunk opened on this CPU. That is just flat out bonkers right there. No, it is not playable. Yes, I tried frame generation. No, that didn't make it better. It made it the same, if not worse. But still, though, it is actually running. It's walking, but it is actually opened, and it's actually doing things. I am shocked. What's even more surprising is the frame rate. Sure, it's only 10 frames per second for the average, but the 1% lows, they are 5 frames per second. Yes, I'm excited about 5 frames per second. I know that is weird, but the thing is, BattleBit Remastered, it has 0 frames per second, 1% lows. Cyberpunk, a much more intensive game, is 5. I don't understand that at all. I let Destiny 2 open for about 10 minutes roughly, and it never appeared to get anywhere. It kind of just sat on these screens, not frozen, but it just kind of sat here. And I looked at the CPU usage, and it was around 80%, which isn't really something you normally see when a game is loading on the CPU. Normally it's pegged at 100%. And to be fair, 80% is something I expect out of this CPU just to play that animated menu that is not progressing. So I'm 95% sure the game just completely gave up. But hey, if Destiny 2 crashes, at least Dota 2 works, right? Well, I guess the right word is actually works. It doesn't run, but it works. It gets about 15 frames per second on average, or 13, right around there, and the 1% lows are around 5. So it's not the worst experience ever when it comes to stutters, but I expect better out of Dota 2. I can't recommend playing Dota with this CPU, but at least it works. Maybe you can have some fun. Maybe not, I don't know. And yes, I am spectating a game and not playing a game, so that might affect the frame rate. I don't know how to play Dota 2, so that's just what I do. I'm kind of surprised that the Dying Light opened, to be fair, but hey, at least it opened. It's not running great. That's kind of the theme with this CPU, but hey, at least it's in the double digits most of the time. The average frame rate is what, around 10, 11, right around that area. So, not the worst in this video so far, but it definitely could be better. Fall Guys actually ran pretty good. Again, not great. I don't think anything's going to run great today, but it ran. And that's all that matters. it like truly actually ran. It was almost getting 30 frames per second on average. Sure, there was lots of input lag in Fall Guys, okay, it was really hard to control the character, but it was running just barely good enough to win, or qualify, or something. I got to the end and qualified is what I'm trying to say, so I would say it's playable. Grand Theft Auto 5 at the absolute lowest settings I can select, meaning normal for everything, unless there's an option below normal, then I went below normal to low. So, basically the very low settings. Either way, the game wasn't running all that good. It was getting about 15 frames per second on average. The 1% lows are nothing, meaning 0. So, yeah, it's not really playable. And then the map likes to disappear. Not likes to, it completely just enjoys it, and that's like its favorite thing to do, is just like disappear out from under you, and then you're driving into the void or something. Yeah. No. Not a very good experience. Let's move on to the next game. Halo Infinite didn't work, so I clicked the button to start the game and it says Halo Infinite, easy anti-cheat, waiting for game, period, and then that disappeared, and it still showed the Halo Infinite logo to the right of Review Tuner in the taskbar, but then that disappeared and the game crashed, so that was my experience in Dota today. What experience? There was none. The next game I'm testing is Minecraft Bedrock Edition, and Minecraft Bedrock Edition ran alright. I mean, it was completely playable, which is quite impressive for one. If this was Java Edition, it wouldn't be running at all. Well, it would be open, but it wouldn't be playable in the slightest. Either way, at least Bedrock Edition was playable. I was playing at the high settings at 8 chunks render distance, and the game was getting around 45 frames per second. Then later on I tried the low settings, and I turned the tick speed up to 50, and it appears turning the tick speed up to 50 seems to have hurt the frame rate some because it got down into the 30s and 40s. So, is it playable? Yes, absolutely. I have a longer video dedicated to this game, specifically with the CPU, but one way or another, I think you'll have a nice time playing Minecraft Bedrock Edition with it. Just keep the settings and render distance on the lower end. The next game is PalWorld. When I tried to play the game, it said validating, and then it proceeded to go and start downloading a humongous update, which would literally take me about half a day to complete, which was way too much. Then I tried Portal non-RTX, and the game on the, I think this is considered the high settings, was running pretty bad, alright? The average frame rate was around 102, and the 1% lows were around 2. Sure, the average was amazing. The 1% lows were absolutely horrible. Then I enabled a vertical sync, which locks the game to my monitor's refresh rate or something like that. It locked the game to 59 or 60 frames per second, and that, sure, it got the average down, but the 1% lows are drastically better. Instead of it being 2 frames per second, it's 28 frames per second, 28. That is actually a significant upgrade, and it's extremely playable with VSync or vertical sync enabled. I know there are much more intensive maps later on in the game. I have played all the way through the game, and I do expect those maps to be a lower frame rate, maybe around 30, but overall it should be playable all the way through the game with this single core CPU. The next game on the list is PUBG, and PUBG didn't work, end of story. Let's go to the next game. Okay, no, not really. Let's just give a little bit of backstory, because what I just said right there was so short I can't even make a chapter out of it on YouTube. It has to be a minimum of 10 seconds. So what I'm trying to say is, yeah, PUBG doesn't work. You already got that. So now we can move on to the next game. Yeah. Team Fortress 2 is extremely hard for me to benchmark because the frame rate when you are unalived by another player versus when you're actually playing is drastically different. I spend a lot of my time not being alive, so yeah, the frame rate is really hard to track. But when I am actually alive, for the few seconds that I actually am, I'm getting mostly below 30 frames per second. and it does have quite a few stutters as well. So, is Team Fortress 2 playable? Kind of. Not really though, it's just not great for an FPS game. Maybe some maps are easier to run than others, maybe not, but at least on whatever map this is, it's not the best, but it might be playable, maybe. And finally, for the final game, I am testing the finals. That's a lot of final in one sentence. Either way, the finals was stuck on a black screen for about 30 minutes, and then after about 30 minutes, it went over and gave me an error message saying, I crashed, or something. It doesn't work, basically. In Cinebench R23, the Celeron G470 got a single core test of 476. By the way, the single core test is blanked out. I can't even do a single core test. It only allows me to do a multi-core test, and that was as well 476. Well, not as well. I mean, there's only one test I ran. It's 476. That's what I'm trying to say. Also, multitasking on the CPU is sluggish, sort of. So, one task is sort of fine. Let's say video editing. That's fine. Or, let's say watching a video. That's fine. But installing a program or watching a video or loading a website or doing all three of those at the same time, yeah, it does bring the system to its knees. But after a while, it does sort everything out and it gets back to somewhat smoothly running again. So, is the Intel Celeron G470 at all useful in 2024? It depends. So, the CPU by itself is fine, alright? You can do some web browsing with it. It's just fine for that. It's a little bit sluggish at times, but it's not so long you get up and make yourself a cup of coffee and come back and the website's not done loading. No, it's not like that at all. It gets the job done, it's sluggish, but it does it with minimal complaints. Once you do some multitasking like what I'm showing you on screen, where I am installing several programs at once and trying to web browse and a bunch of other things, yes, it becomes painful to use. But the main question is, why would you even bother with the CPU? Alright, the reason why is you can get yourself a dual-core Pentium from the same age for very, very cheap, like $3 or $4. You can get yourself a 4-core 8-thread Xeon from the same age, same socket, motherboard probably supports it, and it will be drastically better. You can play, let's say, Cyberpunk at almost 60 frames per second, okay, probably 40 plus most of the time, for like $9 or $10. There's no reason to get a Celeron anymore, there really isn't. But if you have the CPU and a computer, yes, it's actually usable, just not great. And yes, I actually did edit this entire video on this CPU. It took me about 8 hours to edit the video, but before I edit the video, do you see how it's optimizing clips down here? It has to optimize clips before it all plays back smoothly. I use Movavi Video Editor 2024, by the way. It's a rather lightweight video editing software, but it does everything I need. Either way, when the video is optimizing, it's pretty laggy, but again, once it's done optimizing, it's a pretty smooth experience. Sometimes it does hiccup and kind of freeze for a while or loop my voice a few times, but that's pretty rare. Overall, the editing experience has been perfectly fine. I don't know how exporting is going to be. It's probably going to take a long time because, well, we're dealing with a single core here, okay? A single core with video exporting is not going to be very snappy. But either way, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. But yeah, thank you very much for watching this video, everyone. And until next time, have a good night, because it's 4 in the morning. I need to go to bed.